everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Decisions Now. I'm Erin Pearson, the host of the podcast, along with Rigvinath Chevala. And today we are so excited. We have Charles Boyle joining us, who is the Global VP of Data and Analytics at Octo Telematics. Charles, welcome.
Thank you.
Charles, so one of the things that we're kind of here to talk about is Octo Telematics. You guys are a leading provider of telematics services. You do advanced data and analytics, and you specifically work within like the insurance sector, fleet telematics, and smart mobility quite a bit. And it's really quite interesting. We work together in some of these areas as well. And one of the themes that we're going to go through is how these industries are applying AI into their area of business. So just to get us started and to help the audience with a little bit of background and context, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing within AI for areas like motor insurance or fleet management, OEMs, et cetera?
Sure. So it's a great starting point for the discussion, and quite honestly, the industry is actually going through a bit of a digital transformation, right? We're moving away from device-based telematics, similar to one that I just showed on the video there, and migrating to more smartphone, using the smartphone as a sensor, collecting data from your tablets, collecting data even from what we call smart tags, which can be affixed on your window, your windshield, or even battery mounted devices. As we move away from this hardware centric platform into what's deemed more embedded telematics, there's something that's evolving in terms of the connected vehicle. When you think about the connected vehicle, it's all of the telemetry data that can be derived from the vehicle during different trips that you're taking and driving the particular asset, and that data is actually being streamed into centralized data repositories for analytics purposes. And one of the core areas of AI and machine learning that Octo is leveraging right now is around crash detection, crash reconstruction, and damage estimation. So if you think about the core business problem for insurance carriers is, how do we optimize the claims management process? I mean, you've seen on the different television commercials, you could take a picture of the damage, it'll get sent into a claims adjuster. We can actually accelerate some of that by actually being proactive, detecting that an accident or event has taken place, upload that information for first notice of loss, send that into your insurance carrier via a digital platform, actually reconstruct what took place based upon all the telemetry data that's coming off of the asset, and then pulling together a crash dossier that the insurance adjuster can work from, as opposed to just photography, right? Digital images.
That's pretty cool.
That's
Yeah,
super
it takes me down the memory lane, Charles. I worked at Trimble before, and was exposed to the fleets and how the telematics work and the sensors within the trucks, for that matter, right? So yeah, you're right. I think we've come a far way from just having these embedded devices on the vehicles, down to using your smartphones. Everyone has one, so it's a pretty smart move.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's not just. I mean, even though insurance is our primary kind of line of business, we operate and connect with different fleets who do some self insurance. We're obviously working with the OEMs on the auto side to gain access to the data model directly, standardize it in such a way so that we can enable our services accordingly, and really grow into a diversified business.
So when people are going through this digital transformation, what does that actually look like as you're working with all these various sectors? How are they actually moving from that more hardware-based model into this embedded model?
It's interesting because the notes that I wrote down for this question were, it's good and it's bad in the same breath, right? So it's good because you want to go to an all digital platform eventually, but quite honestly, the OEMs haven't caught up yet with the level of granularity.
And one second to just pause there. For those who don't know, an OEM, it's an original equipment
The
manufacturer
auto
also.
manufacturer. Yeah,
Just
sorry.
auto okay.
I'm, I'm using acronyms.
Just as we're speaking like industry terms here, I want to make sure
Completely
that we
fine,
define the
completely fine.
acronyms.
But what was interesting about that topic is, there's a lot of granularity in the data that can be captured on a device that's embedded in your OBD, right, in your
Yeah.
OBD2 port,
Right.
or in a smart tag, or even in your smartphone, quite honestly. But when we think about the playing field for data procurement, right, as it relates to smart mobility, not all OEMs are are using the same devices. They're not embedding the same software in their, firmware in their vehicles. I actually drive a Ford Expedition, and they have a fantastic app, and they do a really good job, and I get reports about my driving and how good or bad I am. And so there's something to be said for that.
That's right. And I've heard about Tesla having a similar thing with a higher fidelity of how much data they collect.
Well, the
Down.
reason why Tesla is doing that is
Uh-huh.
because they want to have their own insurance
That's a
company
good point. Yeah.
built into, it's almost like a subscription as a service for a vehicle, which I'm completely for as a business model. I can't wait to get there because I have buyer's remorse when I drive it off the lot.
No, that's awesome. And I think Rigby, as like you were pointing out, I think when you have companies like Tesla, they're kind of more of a software company right now than they are an auto manufacturer right now. So Charles, do you think that that's going to be true going forward for many auto manufacturers? Is they're going to have to shift to that similar mindset, or do you not see that as
I
a
see
big
the
challenge?
shift to more of a data company, right? I mean, I think they want to replicate the model that Tesla and Rivian and others are going down the path, right? They want the firmware that's embedded in the vehicle to be able to capture data for predictive maintenance, for customer retention, obviously for insurance. I mean, I don't know when's the last time anyone on the call is gone to purchase a new vehicle, but they hound you about insurance before you even leave. I'm like, I thought you used to come to the table with your own insurance. Now they want to sell you insurance there.
That's a good point.
So it's just an interesting change in culture. I think it's we're going to more of an e-commerce platform where we're buying directly from the manufacturer. We're not going through dealers anymore. We're actually going to multi-brand car dealers now. So Octo has some synergies with the dealer population and trying to manage the inventory for multiple vehicles and makes and models at like a CarMax or an AutoNation, where you could have 5 or 6 different OEM manufacturers, auto manufacturers on site.
I see.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. So one of the things that's also happened is with the start of COVID back in 2020, as everyone remembers, buyer behavior really changed, or driver behavior really changed at that point in time. And so how has that actually caused a shift in the industry that you're in and impacted what people are able to do and how they're tracking?
Yeah, I mean,
everything?
during the entire COVID, I don't know, pandemic, right? We were very lax there wasn't much data being captured, right? Because people were pretty
That's right.
stagnant. They were locked up in their homes. Unfortunately, I guess depending upon the way you look at it, one of the reasons why you're seeing such a pretty aggressive market for used vehicles is because there's not a lot of vehicles with a lot of mileage on it, because for 2 years we were locked up, right? We were locked inside our homes for the most part. So that was a rough patch for us from a data procurement, data collection perspective, but we've obviously come out of that. People are out and about again, and that data is being compiled and put into our data lake. I think when we started in the pandemic, pre-pandemic, we were at like 4.5 million connected users worldwide. Now we're up over 6
Wow.
and 510 billion kilometers of driving behavior data and different events that have taken place. For us, I think the one negative dynamic that played out was you didn't get as many crashes, or you didn't get any as
Hmm.
driving events that took place during that time, because if you did venture out, you were probably doing it and you had open road ahead of you.
Right. That's right. Yeah. But then
Sure.
you also, I'm guessing, and you tell me if the behavior data says otherwise. You also have new types of drivers now, like
Yes,
the
you do.
whole Instacarts and the Door Dashes.
Oh yes.
So do you already see patterns in the difference in how the behavior of that driving set is?
Yeah, we're seeing that, and we're actually getting an earful from our insurance clients to say, hey, I don't know that, Mr. or Mrs. Smith should be using their Audi Q7 to drive for Amazon and deliver packages, because they're on a personal
That's right.
lines insurance policy, and that's more commercial means.
Hmm.
So what's interesting in the data that we've been able to source, we're being able to identify more clearly those DoorDash drivers, the
Hmm.
Uber Eats, the Instacart, like you said,
Hmm.
even the folks who are driving for Amazon part time and using their personal vehicle as opposed to, one of the Amazon Prime delivery vans. So that's a critical component for us. It's actually on our roadmap to refit a last mile score, or a gig economy score. So that's definitely on the roadmap for 2023.
Sure. So that means that the data that's you guys are using is going to help these providers figure out if they're building insurance, how much risk is involved with various clients that they're working with, and what is the pricing potentially that they should be doing, or potentially more dynamic pricing. Is that what's kind of coming ahead for
Correct. I mean, we,
insurance?
we, we didn't get into the different profiles, or the products and services that Octo brings to market, but for the insurance clients, our primary service is the industry leading driving risk behavior scorecard. So think about it like the credit score, right? Like your FICO credit score, but based on your driving habits and your
Hmm.
driving behaviors. And insurance companies are using that because it's an insurance grade score that's based on claims and observed losses. And ultimately, they're using that to differentiate risk profiles and price the premiums accordingly.
And is it safe to assume that you're using machine learning to predict their future behavior, perhaps based on how they're doing it, or is it just in the background helping you determine a risk score, like you said?
So basically, we use machine learning to develop the features or
Hmm.
the components of the behavior risk score,
Okay,
and that risk score is done by GLM,
Hmm.
general linear models.
I see. Okay, well, that's interesting. And I know we didn't get into predictive maintenance or any like have you ventured into that? Because like you said, you have 510 billion miles or kilometers of data. That's huge, right? And so does that tell you anything about how the vehicles behave over time? And
It does. We've created something called the Vehicle Health Index for assessing the actual value of the
Mhm,
vehicle based upon your driving habits and driving behaviors. So, think about your captive auto finance companies who are taking a residual when they're leasing a vehicle
mhm,
to somebody like me who will drive the vehicle for 36 months and then hand them the keys back.
mhm,
So they might assess the residual at 50% at the end of 36 months, but if they know how I drive,
mhm.
maybe it's 48, maybe it's 45, right? Maybe it's higher. Maybe
Yeah.
they're hurting themselves, and that they can charge less and drive more volume. In addition to that, we've really been focused around, isolating the behaviors that are important. Um, for characteristics of risk, right? So we're looking at not only the behavioral aspect, but the environmental. So bringing in the roads component, bringing in distance, looking at the weather, looking at distracted driving for people who still don't use the hands-free device. I mean, it's critically important in the differentiation of risk.
Oh, that's interesting. So the next time I return my leased car, I need to ask the guy, what's my index score?
Not only that, you should ask them. It's funny. I was telling somebody on my team earlier this week that I've never lost in leasing. Like typically they'll come back and say, no, we're all square, or
Yeah,
here's $1,500 because the car sold for better,
yeah.
for more than we anticipated. That's where I think that we're going, right? We
Hmm.
need to be able to assess that risk, from a residual perspective.
Nice.
Um, so that's, I guess, I have some family members who have Teslas, so they were trying out the self-driving capabilities. And so how Tesla, of course, does it is they give you this like you have to drive for like I don't know exactly how much time, but let's just say 2 weeks or something. And you
Yep.
have to get a score of 100%
Yeah.
on safe driving before they'll
Right.
actually give you access to the feature as well. So I guess it's kind of like everyone's kind of doing it in their own ways to get
Exactly, and you
access
know
to
what? There's a
different
lot of
areas.
competition out there. There's not even though we feel like we have the industry leading risk behavior scorecard. There are other insurance companies who have built their own custom scores. There are
Hmm.
competitors of ours that have safety scores and other crash propensity type of scoring algorithms. They're all helpful in assessing risk.
So I actually did have a question on this. So there's a common question when people are talking about AI that they feel like it's removing some human jobs as well. Do you foresee that with AI taking over things like being able to assess risk, that would take away some jobs, or do you see it as really enabling and helping grow in different areas and expanding what we're able to do?
I think it's an enabler, quite honestly, because you need someone who's going to be able to interpret the models, right? I think at some point in the future, the data scientist who's actually building the models and cleansing the data to get the data prepped for modeling purposes, and then deploying the model is going to go migrate away from doing that hands-on, quantitative modeling and statistical programming, and just be the interpreter of the results. And you basically go from data scientist to data translator.
Okay. Yeah, we just heard about that role recently.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
expecting somebody else.
So that makes sense because if and I lived in Cleveland, so there's a leading insurance provider there. I had a lot of friends working there, and it was highly rules based. 10-15 years ago, right? And
Sure.
literally, they had a rules engine that they built in house to manage the pricing in different states, different counties, all of that. But it was definitely not based on behavior back then, right? So the way you're stating it, it makes sense because you really can't interpret that data, that huge amount of data, and not create new jobs. Like literally, you have to go with the data, right? As the data increases.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And you know what? When you asked the question about the AI and machine learning integration into the process, we're constantly evaluating new data sources, how it impacts our models and our algorithms to see if it adds any lift. And quite honestly, sometimes it's a trial and error process. You get some new data.
Hmm.
The way that our drivability score is set up, it's a contributory database. So if you're utilizing the score, you're also sharing a sample of claims data with us so that we can continue to refine and
Hmm.
retrain the models and allow it to evolve over time with more data. So I think it's just natural that you're going to continue to enable um, that quantitative expertise.
Right.
So I think with this, there's also we talked a little bit about how, I mean, certainly there's like tons of data that's available that's being leveraged. So you can use it to do risk, dynamic pricing. But then we also had discussed when we had talked to, I guess, at this point, I guess it was a couple months ago, but it enables things like coaching and driver engagement as well. So there's other services that it also opens up within a company that they could potentially use for upsells or cross sells, right?
Yeah, I
For their
think
drivers.
with we call it, or it's called in the industry, usage-based insurance program. So it's pay as you drive or pay how you drive, right? And if you have the application where it's identifying the behaviors, it's capturing the data, it's actually providing some level of engagement and gamification. You're interacting with the app, you're seeing that this weekend you were a 75 score, and during the week you're 100 because you don't do much besides drop the kids off at school and come back or whatever, or driving to work, and your job is pretty local. um, that level of engagement gives us, and the digital engagement, right? So you're able to turn on the application and look at your score, and we can provide alerts and coaching of how to improve your score over time. There's a lot of interesting dynamics that fall out of that. Because we get questions all the time. How did weather play into into my score this time, or how did
Mhm.
the distance? Well, I remember back in the day where they used to call you up and ask you, well, what's your daily commute look like, right? And that's how they put you in a box
Yep.
for your premium. Be like 11 miles. I only could do 11 miles a day. You always want to stay under 11 miles.
Or even the garaging location, right?
Yes, right,
I
exactly.
used to have friends who would pick the lowest garaging location, and now you can't do that. They know the location of your car
Exactly. And
overnight.
that's the other thing. Stolen vehicle recovery.
Yeah,
If you have one of these in your car, I could find it. It's like having a built-in LoJack.
right, right.
Are you seeing that people are already leveraging it for that? Like, how many cars available today are actually using this technology versus how many do you think are still needing to be
Well, I
transitioned
think it
over?
depends on which solution, right? I think all vehicle, or I would say the majority of vehicles that are 2019 or newer have it already embedded in the vehicle. So your older than 2019 vehicles will either have the ability to have an OBD,
Mhm.
or you know drive it digitally via smartphone as a service. It's growing, and it's funny because it's a certain segment of customers that are interested in it. I've always had this conversation internally. So I don't think I'm the core constituent for this, because I live in Delaware and my insurance rates are really low. Like probably if someone heard how inexpensive it was, be like, oh, we're gonna move to Delaware because it's really cheap. It's not like I come from New York originally, so I'm not the true kind of market segment.
Mhm.
But I think if you had a teenage driver and your rates were going to go up, you sure would want to put one of these devices in your vehicle. That way you can get offered a 15-20% discount right off the bat and be able to manage behaviors.
Okay, so then that's the commercial incentive
It is.
for the people. So then then most people obviously have to consent to sharing this data,
True.
but if they're getting a discount in return, they'll probably check the box anyway.
Yeah, consent management is critical in our business, right?
Hmm.
Your insurance companies will assure us that we're remaining in compliance with data governance.
Hmm.
When you click through the app, you're obviously opting in. But again, to your point, you're getting that incentive,
Yeah.
a 10 or 15% discount right off the bat.
Hmm. So then that also begs the question on data privacy, or concerns, I guess. Do like is there, I don't know if you've noticed, and because we've been talking about ethical AI in general, and how bias kind of creeps in. So have you made sure, or at least had some thought processes set up in your data collection all the way down to your modeling, to ensure that there's no bias? How did you tackle that?
Yeah, I think we actually tackled that by developing complementary scores.
Mm.
So in general, you have to have your location services enabled on your smartphone in order for the solution to work most effectively.
Hmm.
And what we've noticed is even though you signed up for the program, 2 to 3 weeks later, maybe a month later, you're getting that reminder that says, "Hey, do you want to continue to share your information, your location information with such and such app?" And then 30% of the people say no,
Yeah.
but they don't remember
Uh,
that they opted into this program. So we actually have an alternative score that comes in on top of the original score that you signed on for, that will remove the GPS components, still provide the insurance company some lift, but it's not the same score as you had signed up for originally, where we were tracking your location. And it's just an alternative model. Instead of getting 10x lift in observed losses and differentiation in the different segments, it's like 7x. So the roads component, or kind of the GPS location components, add some lift. It's a sizable portion of lift, but you're still getting a directional view on risk, even if someone disables the location services. I've done it by accident before. Quite honestly, I watch my kids on Life 360, and it'll ask me all the time, "Do you want to keep sharing your location?" Like, "Yep." "Oh, nope."
yeah.
"Oh, sorry."
Oh wow, that's a very interesting approach. It kind of reminds me what the banks do. They call it the maker checker model. So they basically have two separate teams doing the same thing with their own approaches, and then look for consensus, right? So it sounds like you've figured out a consensus model there.
We did, and what happened was, I actually worked in financial services for 15 years before I came over to IoT, and I always refer back to the credit scoring companies, the credit bureaus have summarized credit statistics. You don't have to have the individual, right, and
Mm.
sharing their information. You can locate it by an MSA code, or make an assessment or assumption based upon different regions, or different geosets, and still have some directional lift in your credit risk differentiation.
Nice. Hmm.
So we only have a couple minutes left for today, but Charles, I did want to ask you something that's a little bit different from what we've been
Okay.
talking about. And you guys do some stuff within smart mobility as well. And I think that's an emerging area that a lot of people don't know a ton about. So it's everything from like how to build like the EV charging infrastructures, predictive parking, the retail location selection of different businesses, traffic management. So can you talk a little bit to where do you see that going, and how do you see all of the data coming in to help power that
Sure.
as
So,
well?
I mean, you can imagine there's a lot of effort and expense being associated with sustainability initiatives, with going green, and driving more economically, and just kind of the social responsibility aspects. And so what Octo's been doing is collating all of this data from the different connected users that we have globally, and helping with that migration that's going to eventually happen, right? We're all going to migrate from internal combustion or ICE vehicles to either some type of hybrid or EV
Hmm.
in the near future. But again, there's an infrastructure that needs to be supported in order to, assist in that migration. So one of the core use cases is what you mentioned earlier, was the EV charging station infrastructure. So in certain European cities, we've been able to capture all the data around the different trips from origin to destination, and assess based on average battery capacity, and mileage range, where would be the most optimal placement
Mm.
locations for these EV charging stations. We've been told by different battery manufacturers that or utilities, that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5,000 euro to install one of these charging stations. And it's not going to be like a gas station where you're going to find one and it's going to have 10 or 12
Hmm.
pumps, or 10 or 12 ports to log in. they're going to be on the street,
Mhm.
right? Or they're going to be in a parking garage, and there's only going to be 1 or 2 or 3 of them. There's not going to be, a whole, fuel station or a petrol station uh, with multiple pumps. So it's one of those situations where it's an optimization. It's a constrained optimization solution that you're developing.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think it is cool, and I think it's a great way to think about where things are going,
And that's just
and
one
how we
use
can also
case. Quite
expand.
honestly, there's
Yeah,
multiple. I've had companies come
awesome.
to us regarding predictive maintenance. I mean,
Mhm.
Rigby, you mentioned earlier about predictive maintenance. We've worked with brake companies,
Mhm.
companies who develop brake pads,
Yep.
and helping them there, understanding, in the general region that their sales are, is it a likelihood that there's going to be more of a need, or should they migrate away from more performance vehicles to more traditional passenger sedans, and the different products and services that they can offer there. We've talked about predictive parking. We've talked about, looking into finding the ideal location for retail stores,
Okay.
based upon traffic patterns and traffic management. And we've even had some state and local government municipalities come to us to assess bridges, tunnels, the traffic around roundabouts. In New Jersey, they call them jug handles.
Yes, I remember those.
It's all good.
Yeah. Wow, that's
I mean, I think it's great. I think it shows where a lot of things are going, and how things are going to be evolving. And I think one of the things that at least I personally find quite interesting about this is you don't oftentimes think of a number of these things as having all of this data in it. Or I'm sure you guys might, but I don't think as it having as much data in it as they actually do. So thinking about the different applications and how things and like smart cities and everything can be created using all of this type of data is quite interesting, and what we're going to see developing quite a bit over the next couple of
yeah, I
years.
agree.
Yeah,
And
I'm really looking forward to it.
all the alternate use cases you mentioned, I wouldn't have thought that, someone would go to Octo to get that information, but you have it, so that's
Yeah,
awesome.
exactly. Well, you have to glean the insights from the data.
Exactly.
We've got a huge data
Sure.
repository.
Yep.
Well, Charles, I think that's actually a great sentiment to end on. Also, is it's not just about having the data, but it's about having the insight within it. But Charles, it was great having you on the podcast today, and I really enjoyed the
Thanks for the time. I
conversation.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Charles.
Access the full episode of Decisions Now on our website, and don't forget to subscribe to Decisions Now podcast today.